Hi, this is Kia. So I decided to basically just go over my life. I wrote a book before about my life, but I didn't get it published. So, and I kind of like talking to this. I'm getting all my frustrations out on this. Um, I'm basically talking to myself, but if you see it, you see it. I know people can relate to my life, so I'm going to start to do videos on here and do them as if it was my book. So this is going to be chapter one video. So chapter one, how I got here on earth. So my mom was 26 years old when she conceived me, or 25. She had me at 26. Um, my father and my mother met at a bar. He was married, and my mother was not. Um, I'm going to get into all of that too. So they hooked up and ended up conceiving me. So my mom is one of those independent black women. She can do anything on her own. She takes care of her own responsibilities. She's just one of those strong women. Um, my mom is the baby, so she's very strong-willed. She speaks when whatever comes to her mind. She don't care who's she's. I'd like to call her mean, but she can be a very stern. That's a better word. She's very stern. So my mom never told my dad that she was pregnant. So they hooked up, and then he didn't live in the same city as my mother did. So my mom traveled to where he was to go to that bar. So when they hooked up, they ended up conceiving me. My mom never told him that she was pregnant because he was married. So when he seen her again, she was showing. My dad says that she was like 5, 6 months. My mom said the same thing about 5, 6 months, but she was showing. And my mother is very tall and she was very skinny. She used to be a model. So my mom is 6'2", 6'3". Probably then she was like 150, if that. So he seen her again and she was pregnant. She cussed him out completely, and never went back, never even knew, never looked that way again. So that's how I was conceived. That's who my parents are. So I grew up, well, my mother moved here to Rochester, and she left me with my grandmother, and until she was able to get herself established here in Rochester, and that's how we got here to Rochester. So I was staying with my grandmother. She finally sent for me. So when I came here, my mother was working. We were living in the projects, and I'm the only child, so it was just me and my mother. And I do remember some of this. I went to daycare, and I wasn't feeling well. And I had to been like 1 or 2. Wasn't feeling well. They said I had a very high fever. So they called my mother. My mother took me to the hospital. I ended up having spinal meningitis at 1 or 2 years old. So I had spinal meningitis, and I do remember this. I don't know if it's because it was traumatic, but I can remember bits and pieces of me being in the hospital that young. So but I'm not gonna go into details. But I do remember being in the crib, crying constantly, just crying constantly. And I remember the pain. I do. I remember the pain. I remember them, somebody holding me and telling me it was okay. I was going to be fine. It was okay. And that's pretty much all that I remember. Now, my mom and my grandmother told me that they didn't know if I was going to make it because of how high the fever was. And then once I pulled through, they said that I were going to have disabilities. So I wasn't going to be able to walk, wasn't going to be able to talk, and was going to be blind. So when I came through, after a month being in the hospital, I came through of it pretty much with nothing. God had his hand on me. But it started a journey for me that I still deal with today. So, my grandmother came from Pennsylvania when I was in the hospital, just to be, my grandmother is a nurse as well, just to be with my mom and me. I was very close to my grandmother. When they see my grandma, they see me. I was like right there. So my grandmother came to the hospital where I was. I was in there for a month. In fact, when I tell my doctors that I had spinal meningitis as a baby, they can't believe it. They can't believe that I don't have anything wrong with me. Well, I have stuff wrong with me, but the stuff that they said that were going to be wrong with me, they couldn't believe that it didn't turn out that way. So they said that I was a miracle from birth. So, now mind you, I never knew of my dad or anything like that. But I pulled through, and my mother took me home, and that's all I can remember from me being that little. Oh, and I do remember some wintertime, my mother would bundle me up, and because we live in the projects, the center is like around the corner, that I used to go to daycare at. So I remember the winter time. It was very snowy and cold. My mom wrapped me up in a blanket, had me in her arms, and she fell on the sidewalk with me in her arms. I remember that. But that's all I can remember from the childhood years. I had, this story is going to be very intense. This was chapter 1. There is a lot that goes on in my life that when I actually tell people or talk about it in meetings and seminars and stuff, they say, "Kia, you need to tell your story." So I ended up writing a book, but it never published. I never actually did anything with it. So I'm gonna be telling this on here. This was chapter 1. So either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I would do chapter 2. So that was my growing, being born in my childhood. From what I can remember as a youngster. And then when I come back in chapter 2, I'll talk about my teenage years. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, like, comment, share. I'm trying to get this channel to grow. I want to tell my story. I feel like young ladies can definitely learn from it. Yeah, more to come. Chapter 2 coming soon. Okay, bye.